June 20th, 2001. Houston, Texas. 9:48 a.m. A 911 dispatcher picks up the phone. On the other end is a woman. Her voice is calm, almost flat. "I need a police officer." When police walk into the house on Beachcomber Lane, what they see will haunt them forever. 5 children, all under the age of 8, all drowned in the bathtub. Their mother, 37-year-old Andrea Yates, is waiting for them. She doesn't run. She doesn't cry. She simply confesses. This wasn't some shadowy stranger. This was a former nurse, a quiet overachiever, a woman friends once described as the perfect mother. So how does someone like that end up here? How do you go from being the most likely to succeed to doing the unthinkable? Before we go further, here's a warning. This story includes mental illness, suicide attempts, and harm to children. Please take care while watching. This is the story of Andrea Yates. And it's not just about evil. It's about what happens when severe mental illness collides with pressure, isolation, and a system that doesn't listen until it's far too late. Andrea Pia Kennedy was born in 1964 in Houston, Texas. She was the youngest of 5 in a devout Catholic family. From the outside, her childhood looked ordinary, even stable. Andrea was shy, but she was brilliant. She was on the swim team. She made the honor roll. She served as a class officer. In high school, classmates remembered her as quiet, disciplined, focused. The kind of girl who never caused trouble, never raised her voice. Underneath that calm surface, though, something darker was already there. As a teenager, Andrea developed an eating disorder. She would binge, then force herself to vomit. At the same time, she began struggling with depression and thoughts of suicide. But she didn't tell anyone. She kept studying, kept smiling in photos, kept being perfect. After graduating, Andrea studied nursing at the University of Houston and later worked as a registered nurse at the MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston. Colleagues described her as kind, gentle, almost painfully soft-spoken. In 1989, at an apartment complex in Houston, Andrea met an engineer named Rusty Yates. He worked for NASA. He was smart, ambitious, deeply religious. They connected over their faith and their desire to live a godly life. Rusty admired Andrea's quiet strength. Andrea was drawn to Rusty's confidence and certainty. They married on April 17, 1993. To everyone who knew them, they looked like the perfect Christian couple. A steady engineer husband, a caring nurse wife, planning a big family. But very quickly, the pressure around what that big family should look like would start to crush Andrea. After they married, Rusty introduced Andrea to a traveling street preacher named Michael Warnicki. His sermons were intense, fire and brimstone. According to media reports and letters presented later, his preaching heavily emphasized sin, hell, and strict obedience. Some former followers said his teachings made women feel inherently weak and sinful, and terrified of failing as mothers. Andrea, already fragile and perfectionistic, absorbed that message. Rusty and Andrea decided they would have as many babies as God allowed. In 1994, their first child, Noah, was born. In 1995, John. In 1997, Paul. Andrea stopped working to become a full-time, stay-at-home mother. 3 kids under the age of 4, no real breaks, and a growing belief that if she failed even a little bit as a mother, her children's souls were at risk. Then Rusty made a decision he thought would simplify their lives. In the late 1990s, he bought an old GMC motorhome from the Warnicki family. The plan was to live simply and travel. For a time, the Yates family, 2 adults, 3 small boys, lived together in that cramped bus. Imagine cooking, cleaning, homeschooling, potty training, and breastfeeding in a metal box on wheels. No privacy, no personal space, no real support. After Andrea's mental health began to slide, the family eventually moved back into a small house. But the damage from that period, the isolation and stress, had already taken a toll. On February 15, 1999, Andrea gave birth to their 4th child, a son named Luke. Not long after Luke's birth, Andrea's mental health shattered. On June 16, 1999, Rusty found her shaking and compulsively biting her fingers. The next day, she attempted suicide by overdosing on pills and was hospitalized. Doctors diagnosed her with severe depression and postpartum psychosis. She was prescribed antidepressants and later an antipsychotic drug, Haldol. On Haldol, she improved quickly. One psychiatrist, Dr. Eileen Starbranch, gave the couple a very clear warning. Another pregnancy, she said, would guarantee future psychotic depression. Despite that warning, the Yateses conceived again about 7 weeks after Andrea left the hospital. On November 30th, 2000, Andrea gave birth to their 5th child, a daughter named Mary. For a little while, things seemed better. Family and doctors would later say she appeared more stable. Then, in March 2001, Andrea's father died. After his death, Andrea spiraled. She stopped taking some of her medication. She stopped eating properly. She stopped feeding Mary at times. She became withdrawn, almost catatonic, obsessively reading her Bible. She was hospitalized again in April and May of 2001. Doctors once more prescribed Haldol. Once more, she improved. But in the weeks leading up to June 20th, her antipsychotic medication was discontinued. Critics later argued that taking her off that medication, given how severe her psychosis had been, was a catastrophic decision. Andrea's delusions roared back. She began to believe Satan was inside her. She became convinced that she was a terrible mother, so terrible that her children would be damned because of her. In her psychotic state, she formed a terrifying solution. If she killed them while they were still innocent, she thought their souls would go to heaven. If she didn't, she believed they would grow up corrupted and go to hell. On the morning of June 20th, 2001, Rusty left for work. He left Andrea alone with all 5 children. Within an hour, they were all dead. What happened in that small Houston house is almost impossible to process. Andrea filled the bathtub with water. One by one, she brought her children into the bathroom. First Mary, the baby, then the boys Luke, Paul, John. She held each child under the water until they stopped struggling, then laid them on a bed and covered their bodies with a sheet, as if she were putting them down for a nap. Her oldest, 7-year-old Noah, realized something was horribly wrong. He tried to run. Andrea chased him, dragged him back to the bathroom, and drowned him too. When it was over, she called 911. Then she called Rusty at work and told him, "You need to come home." Police arrived to find Noah still in the bathtub. The other 4 children were laid out on the bed. Andrea calmly confessed. She told officers she killed her children because she was a bad mother and didn't want them to grow up to be damaged. She believed, in that moment, that she was saving their souls. Andrea Yates was arrested and charged with capital murder. Her trial began in early 2002 and immediately became a media obsession. The prosecution argued that Andrea knew right from wrong. She had waited until Rusty left. She had called 911 afterwards. They said those actions proved she was legally sane, and they sought the death penalty. The defense told a different story. They described years of depression, psychosis, suicide attempts, hospitalizations. Psychiatrists testified that Andrea was in the grip of severe postpartum psychosis and genuinely believed her children were better off dead than damned. In March 2002, the jury found Andrea Yates guilty of capital murder. She was sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 40 years. But that wasn't the end. In 2005, her conviction was overturned on appeal after it was revealed that a prosecution expert, Dr. Park Dietz, had given incorrect testimony about an episode of a TV show that never actually existed. Andrea was retried in 2006. This time, the jury reached a different conclusion. They found her not guilty by reason of insanity. Andrea Yates was sent to a secure state psychiatric hospital in Texas, where she remains to this day. The Andrea Yates case is one of the most disturbing family tragedies in modern American history. It forces us to ask hard questions. Who failed here? Was it Andrea? Was it her husband? Her doctors? The mental health system? Or a culture that tells mothers to be perfect while giving them almost no support? Andrea Yates wasn't a movie monster. She was a woman with a long history of serious mental illness, schizophrenia and postpartum psychosis, who repeatedly asked for help, was hospitalized multiple times, and then taken off the very medication that had stabilized her. Psychiatrists had explicitly warned against more pregnancies. Those warnings were ignored. Warning signs were minimized, and 5 children paid the ultimate price. Their names were Noah, John, Paul, Luke, and Mary. They were 7, 5, 3, 2, and 6 months old. Nothing can ever make sense of what happened to them. Today, Andrea Yates is in her 60s, still living in a psychiatric facility in Texas. Reports say she spends her days doing crafts, watching videos of her children when allowed, and expressing deep remorse for what she did. She has declined opportunities for release. Some people see this case and say, she deserved the harshest punishment. Others look at the medical records and say, this is exactly what insanity looks like. Maybe both reactions are really about the same thing. How terrifying it is to realize that the mind can break so badly, and that it can happen inside a normal-looking family in a normal suburban house with no one noticing until it's too late. If you or someone you know is struggling with postpartum depression, postpartum psychosis, or any mental health crisis, please reach out for help to a doctor, a trusted person in your life, or your local emergency services. You are not alone, and early help can save lives. Thank you for watching. Stay safe and take care of your mind. If you found this story important and want to see more content like this, please hit that like button, share this video, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps spread awareness and keeps these conversations going. I'll see you in the next one.